Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an author and a poet. My latest book is called The Girl Aquarium, and I also teach poetry. Today I'm going to talk to you about how I write poetry, or more specifically, how I write the poem that I'm going to write today. This video is very kindly sponsored by Skillshare, and I'll speak more about that later. I have made lots of videos on this channel before talking to you about poetry, talking about how you might dissect a poem. I've also spoken about how I edit poems, but I have never taken you through the process of creating a poem from beginning to end, which is what I am going to do today. Many writers, at least in my experience, choose to write either by hand or on computer, maybe both for different stages of the writing process. I find that I think very differently when I'm writing by hand because I can't write as fast as I'm thinking, whereas when I'm typing, I can type faster. I pretty much always write on my computer because I like to edit heavily as I go, especially when I'm writing poetry. I don't get the bare bones down and then go back and edit. I am constantly rewriting, which you'll see when I start to write. I also have arthritis and dactyly, so writing on a computer is generally better for me anyway. So because I write on a computer, what I'm going to do is I am going to record the screen of my computer while I write, so you can see everything. I'm also going to speed up this process, obviously, because I'm going to sit here probably for about 3 or 4 hours writing a poem. So I will speed it up times a lot and then show it to you. And after that, I'm going to read you the poem and I'm going to talk about why I crafted the poem in the way that I did, my thought processes as I was writing it, and why I made all of the writing choices that I did. The way that I approach poetry writing is actually quite different to the way that I approach other kinds of writing. With fiction, I sit myself down and I force myself to write because I have deadlines. I very rarely have deadlines for poetry. It's more of a passion project. So when I sit down to write a poem, I normally have had an idea in the back of my mind that has been snowballing, which is actually appropriate for the poem that I'm writing today. It's snowballing for a while. It was at the back of my brain and it's been creeping closer and closer. I generally don't have an idea of where the poem is going to go specifically, but I have a feeling, which I know sounds very vague. I have a feeling that I can play with. It's like someone's handed me some Play-Doh and said, okay, sculpt something. I have the something and I just have to make it into something people can read. So the image that I've had in my head recently is of a boy standing outside in a back garden, a very blurred image in a blizzard, and he's holding snow in his hands, and people are looking out from the kitchen at this boy. So that is the image that I'm going to be playing around with in this poem. Apparently Lola wanted to get in on the writing process. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down and see what happens, and then we can talk about it. Does that sound good, Lola? What do you think of poetry, huh? Isn't it amusing when poems turn into something that you did not expect at all at the beginning? That happens quite often, and every time it surprises and delights me. Okay, so I'm going to read you the poem and talk to you about all of my thoughts as I was writing it and my thoughts about as it is right now. But first off, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video is very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. I have worked with them many times in the past, and I'll link the videos I've done with them previously in the description box. I've made videos about how to annotate texts. I've made videos about how to make shepherd's pie. I've made videos about how I became freelance and how I organize my time. Whenever I work with Skillshare, I try and make a learning-based video because they are an online learning platform. On their website, they have over 25,000 different classes on pretty much everything. So cooking, academic stuff, things on how to start up a business, how to create a website, so many different things. So say that you're someone who is perhaps looking to write more and you're not sure where to start. They have so many different classes on writing. One of them is on how you can write something every single day. There are prompts for that as well. So that might be particularly helpful. I have a link which is at the top of the description box, and the first 500 people to click on that will get 2 months of Skillshare absolutely free. Skillshare membership is normally $10 a month, which is really affordable compared to lots of other learning platforms out there. So if you're interested in learning a new skill, definitely go and check them out. Okay, so back to the poem that I've just written. It took me 4.5 hours to write this poem, and I may come back to it in the future and tweak it. I always like to let things rest in a drawer for a while, and then I can come back to them as the reader instead of the writer. But for now, this is how it's looking. So I'm going to read it to you, and I'll insert the text on the screen so that you can read along with me. The 5 stages of IVF. The boy stands in our garden, holding all of the snow. He can't be a snowman, I insist. He is far too young for frostbite. He might be mythic or prophetic. Did anyone see him arrive? The snowboy's eyes are kingfishers, blazing countries we would like to visit. Behind him, a squirrel is stealing all of the food. Bending over backwards, Winter Olympics, the boy does not blink, cradling his snow globe. The whole world is a blizzard. We refuse to talk of snow babies incubating in fables, how their fingerprints are the scattered names of endangered species. Instead, we dip our palms in icing sugar and press our mouths to the window. Our longings skitter around the kitchen like so much white noise. As I mentioned before I started writing this poem, the image that I had was of a boy standing in the garden in the snow, holding snow, and people were watching him from the kitchen window. As you will have seen from the sped up footage of me writing the poem, it began in a more general way. I was trying to work out who the people were who were watching him. So there was someone called Abigail, there was someone called Paul, and it was a group of people looking out at this boy. I think it said their garden or a garden, the garden, so it was more distance. And then I changed it because I realized actually it should be about a couple who are looking out. So it is our garden, it's not just a random garden or someone else's, it's their territory. It does feel slightly strange trying to talk about the moment that you realize what a poem is about. I always find when a new book comes out that I have written, I have to go back and read through it and make notes for myself and remind myself of all of the things that I was thinking when I was writing it, all of the imagery. I have to reacquaint myself with the text and learn how to talk about it in an external way as opposed to an internal way, which I actually think is probably helpful for me, but it still feels strange to do. So as I was writing this poem and I realised it was about a couple looking out at this boy, it turned into something else, which you can see from the title of this poem. And this is what I teach in my writing workshops, which I will link down below if you're interested. But I teach many things in the workshops, but something that I think is overlooked a lot of the time is the titles of poems and how important the titles of poems are. I always leave the titling of my poem until the end, until I really know what this poem is about. You set the tone with the title. If you read this poem without reading the title first, if you didn't have a title, which you won't have done as you were watching the sped up version because it wasn't there, you will read something entirely different. And I would be very interested in knowing what you thought the poem was about before that title appeared. And I also want to highlight, when I'm talking about what I was thinking about the poem when I was writing it, is that once I have shared it with you and with other people, that poem ceases to be mine and it means entirely different things to lots of different people. And that's brilliant. That's really exciting. So when I talk about meaning in this poem, I'm talking about my own meaning, but you can take from it whatever the hell you like, because, well, as long as you can back it up with the text, you can make up whatever meaning you like, and that's the beauty of poetry. So as I was writing this, I realised that what I wanted the poem to be about was fertility and infertility and IVF. So I have called the title of this poem, the title of this poem is The 5 Stages of IVF. So when I talk about the 5 stages, what I mean is regulating hormones in a woman's body, injections for encouraging the production of eggs, then the harvesting of those eggs, the taking away of those eggs, the fertilization of those eggs, and then the implantation of those eggs. So those are the 5 stages that I'm talking about. And I blended that with the fairy tale of the snow child. That was what I was thinking about when I was writing it. That was what I came to interpret this image of a boy standing in the snow as being. The fairy tale of the snow child is about a couple who cannot conceive a child, and then one day they discover a baby that's been brought to life from snow, and they take it into their house. Okay, so let's talk about specifics. I'm now going to go back to the screen so I can show you, and I'll use my mouse to highlight certain words so I can talk you through my thoughts as I was writing specific lines. Okay, so here we go. As I said, the first line is the boy stands in our garden. So it's not a garden, it's ours. It's a representation of their territory. It implies a belonging. It says that he is holding all of the snow. How is he holding all of the snow? It's a blurry image, not just to the people looking at him, but to the reader as well. It's something that we can't quite picture. Is snow falling all around him? Is he cupping it in his hands? There's also something powerful about that, holding all of the snow, possibly holding all the power or holding all of the possibilities. There's something magical, because it's an impossible thing to do. You can't hold all of the snow. So there's a hint at magic there. He can't be a snowman. So the narrator is trying to figure out who this boy is. He can't be a snowman, along with the reader. And then it says, I insist. So you may have noticed when I was writing this that it was initially Abigail, and it was Abigail said, and then it was that she insisted. So changing that one word so that you can show the urgency there. So he can't be a snowman, I insist. And with the narrator, with it being in first person, it immediately becomes more personal. And going back to the first line where it says, the boy stands in our garden, it's not a boy stands in our garden, it's the boy. It implies a knowing / not knowing. This specific boy, almost as though they have been waiting for him. So the boy stands in our garden holding all of the snow. He can't be a snowman, I insist. He is far too young for frostbite. So we have a break here. He is far too young. Obviously it continues for frostbite, but having it at the end of the line is an I pause. Your I lingers there. He is far too young. That implies a vulnerability. And then after that, for frostbite, he might, obviously there is a rhyme there between frostbite and might, which means that it sounds pleasing when you read it. For frostbite, he might be mythic. So I have cut off the line here, he might, which implies a possibility. That's something that I played with throughout this, the idea of being and also not being, of glimpsing something and not glimpsing. As I mentioned with the boy at the beginning, a knowing and a not knowing, kind of hovering in this in-between space of being something and not being something. So he might is here, he can't be, the young boy does not. Almost like we're weaving between existing and not existing. So he might be mythic or prophetic. Did anyone see him arrive? So suggesting possibilities for what this boy might be, again hinting at magic. Prophetic as well, that he might be a sign of things to come. If this couple are going through IVF, is this a sign that they are seeing? Did anyone see him arrive? This invites the reader to silently answer this question, as though the reader is part of this with them, is being included, which will draw the reader closer. So the first stanza opens up these possibilities, this questioning. It inserts the idea of fable and of magic and of vulnerability, and it's something specific that we're looking at, but it is outside. And then in the second stanza we zoom in on this boy and we look at him closer. The snow boy's eyes are kingfishers. So he's not a snowman, he's too young to be a snowman, so I've called him a snow boy. This is not a word that actually exists, but it's something that the reader can understand through our understanding of what a snowman is. Eyes is a half rhyme with arrive, so again that's pleasing to read. So did anyone see him arrive? The snow boy's eyes are kingfishers. Kingfishers are so many bright colours, and the idea that his eyes are full of all of these colours against a backdrop of white is exciting. It also implies again these infinite possibilities of what he could be, coupled with blazing countries next to it, like his eyes are blazing countries. That's a warmth, that there is a warmth inside this snow boy, that there is life underneath this layer of snow. The word kingfisher itself is really interesting. Obviously it's a bird, it implies something that is possibly flying away, something that's out of reach, but the words themselves, king and fisher. There are many fairy tales about royals who cannot conceive, kings and queens who have to jump through lots of hoops, who have to do dealings with fairies in order to get the child that they so deeply want. Kings fishing for babies. That's something that's very, very tenuous there, but it's something that is drawn to my mind when I think of that word in this context and why I have placed it there. So the snow boy's eyes are kingfishers, blazing countries we would like to visit. As I said, blazing implies a heat, but also maybe a conflict or something that's very difficult. Blazing countries we would like to visit. That the land of parenthood is somewhere that they want to go. It's a territory they haven't visited. They want to go there. Then after that, we have behind him, a squirrel is stealing all of the food, bending over backwards, Winter Olympics. So behind him, so this is all of the behind the scenes things. Obviously, this is a couple of lines about a squirrel trying to steal bird food, but in the context of IVF, it could be seen as someone who is trying to get at something that they have been told they cannot have for whatever reason. Nuts are seeds, and seeds are associated with birth, with growth, that they can't get to these things because they don't fit. And this is all the behind the scenes stuff of IVF, of bending over backwards to try and get to the thing that you desire so much. So the young boy doesn't react to this. It says the young boy does not blink, cradling his snow globe. Cradling is of course associated with babies, a baby's cradle. He is holding it gently, almost like an egg, which is again, of course, an image of fertility, but cradling his snow globe, like he's holding the world and all the possibilities of this world that could or could not exist. The next line is the whole world is a blizzard, and that's in a stanza of its own. White space around this line to show that blizzard. So we zoom in on this boy cradling his snow globe, this egg, perhaps something like a petri dish, etc. He's cradling this possibility of life, of his own world. And then when we zoom out of that, we see that the whole world around him is in a blizzard. And I've used this image of snow throughout because spring is often associated with fertility, with life, and winter is not. So he is struggling to exist in all of these very harsh conditions. Move on to the next stanza where it says, we refuse to talk of snow babies incubating in fables. So we refuse to talk of snow. I've cut that line there so that snow babies is split over two lines. It's no longer a noun in and of itself, like snow boy and snowman before that. Snow baby. So snow and baby have been separated, perhaps indicating a thawing. Incubating is of course another word that is associated with very young babies incubating in fables, how the possibility of babies can exist in stories, and not just fairy tales like the Snow Child, but also in the narrative that society gives you, that you're expected to have children, that this is the way your life will be, that these possibilities have existed in the narratives around you, but not in your actual life. So we refuse to talk of snow babies incubating in fables. They don't talk about those stories anymore because the reality is so much harsher. How their fingerprints are the scattered names of endangered species. You'll have seen when I was writing this that this part I reworded quite a lot. I often find that I play around with adjectives. Perhaps I'll have many more than I'll need, and then I cut it back because less is more. You will have seen that in several stages of this poem, where it was quite maybe flowery at one point, and then I strip it right back to its bare bones, because I much prefer poetry in that form. How their fingerprints are the scattered names of endangered species. Fingerprints implying DNA and the mark that you leave on the world. And obviously, of course, footprints in snow, they disappear quite quickly. Scattered names, perhaps implying scattered possibilities or lost children. Scattered names, so names that you might have given to children before this point. How their fingerprints are the scattered names of endangered species. Instead, we dip our palms in icing sugar and press our mouths to the window. I've used the phrase "we dip our palms in icing sugar" as almost like they are creating fingerprints themselves. They are leaving their mark, they are showing their DNA. Obviously, also when you are born, they take footprints and fingerprints of you as a child as well, that they are scattering their handprints around the kitchen, which is generally a warm place in contrast to the world that is outside, this snow. It's something that is associated with the heart of the home, with nurturing. So instead we dip our palms in icing sugar and press our mouths to the window, almost like they're blowing kisses outside. If we take it further than them just pressing their mouths against the window to look out into the garden, we could transpose this into a different scenario. If we think of IVF, they could be placing their mouths to the window of a science lab or to the window of a ward looking in on a collection of children. If we think about IVF, where we freeze eggs and then thaw them, there is a lot of freezing involved, which reflects the snow that is littered throughout this poem. The final stanza is "Our longings skitter around the kitchen like so much white noise." At the beginning of the previous stanza, they said they weren't going to talk anymore about these possible babies because otherwise they would talk about nothing else. But it doesn't matter, because as it says in this last stanza, all of their longings, all of their feelings and their wishes are still running around the kitchen unsaid like so much white noise. White noise being the sound that you get on a radio or a television when you're between stations, when you're trying to find a signal. This is the sound of the in-between space of existing and not existing, and of waiting for possibilities. Okay, so those are all the thoughts that I had when I was writing this and how I feel about it now that it is crafted. It's in 5 stanzas to reflect the title of the poem, which is The 5 Stages of IVF. I used the colour white a lot in this because of snow, and as I said, for freezing eggs and linking in with the fairy tale of the Snow Child, which isn't mentioned by name, but I hope is implied in there, and also because the colour white links in with hospitals and with baby grows as well. A lot of baby grows are white, links with like cleanliness and newness of blank pages. I hope that this was interesting. As I said, I may come back to this and edit it more in the future, but for now I feel I'm too close to it to do that, so I need to put it in a drawer and then come back to it. I would love to know what you thought the poem was about as I was creating it and before you saw that title, because of course I was thinking about the title when I was writing it, but that wasn't present yet. But as a reader, in seeing the poem in its final form, that title would have been the first thing that you saw. I would love to know your thoughts about creating poetry if you do write. As I said before, this video is very kindly sponsored by Skillshare, so do go and check them out. I will link them in the top of the description box, and I'll leave links to all of my stuff, my books, and all of the things I do in the description box down below as well, along with all of the videos I've made about poetry in the past. If you're new, it would be lovely if you fancied subscribing. If you have any questions about writing or about poetry, ask me in the comment section and we can have a chat. I hope that you're having a great week, and I will speak to you very soon. Lots of bookish love. Bye.